can we have a Jenkins agent, which is a Docker container, and run our test inside this Docker container? You can pause the video here to see how you would have answered this in the interview. Let me go ahead and share some information about this and then explain how to tackle this question in the interview. The question is focusing upon isolation of pipeline steps. So they were asking if we can run our agent on a Docker container. This is the standard way in which companies today implement pipelines. One of the standard ways, of course. And why do they do that? Please understand, you might have 1 and 2 slave or follower nodes to your Jenkins master node. And if you were to run some test cases, let's say for Java, you might have to have installed certain packages, right? Tomorrow, you might have to run some test cases for Python, and you will end up installing some packages related to Python. What is happening in this is this node has a lot of customization. And in future, if you lose this node and spin up a new node, you should remember all the packages that you have installed in the past. If not, this machine will not be able to run any of your test cases. Hence, what is the best way? Use Docker containers. So you can spin up a Docker container here, then run your code, and you can test your code. So here, the code is expected to run inside the Docker container, which again, you can use a custom Docker image for your company's requirement if it's necessary. This is the best way to perform testing without having every Jenkins agent to be, pre-configured with a bunch of packages. It will become difficult to monitor in future. I have given a standard example on the right side, wherein you can see we call an agent and we actually call a node Alpine image, and this will get downloaded as a part of your pipeline. First, this Docker container will be spun up, and this particular command will run inside this Docker container. Well, does the agent that is running on a node itself needs to have this node package present? No, because you are basically downloading a container, and whatever you are running, the command node -- version will run inside the container. So that's the beauty of using Docker container as a part of your Jenkins pipeline. Well, we have understood the details of this. So how do we answer this question in the interview? To use any kind of Docker containers, I would basically add it as a part of the agent. And we can call any kind of images either from Docker Hub or custom images that we have built. And then whatever the stages and test steps we would mention as a part of our pipeline will run inside this Docker container. If I have to suggest a best way of implementing this in any organization, then I would suggest this is one of the best ways to implement any test cases or have multi-node Jenkins setup. Whenever we have multi-node Jenkins setup, this is one of the best ways to implement complete testing and isolation. Hence, we can scale easily our Jenkins setup also. This is how you can answer this question in the interview. Have you used Jenkins in multi-node setup? If yes, could you explain how to add a new slave or follower to the master? There is a small mistake here. I have written followed, and I will try to correct it later. It's follower, slave or follower to the master. So they are trying to understand if you have set up a multi-node Jenkins setup. Okay, that's the question. Well, you can pause the video here and see how to answer this question. Let me first explain how to do this as part of Jenkins master slave setup. Once you log into Jenkins, you will be able to go to the settings and come to an option called as Manage Jenkins. In this section, you're going to find manage node and cloud option. Once you click on this, you can give the node information, that is the slave or follower information. What is the node IP? What is the password? What is the username, etc. And once you do that, it will get registered with the master Jenkins machine. Well, I would also explain a bit more about master and slave architecture here. It is the fact that just having one node, that is one Jenkins node, is not enough for any organization because it is not a scalable solution. Hence, there is a multi-node setup, and you should leverage this multi-node setup, at least in production pipeline, because this is going to provide you a lot of scalability and high availability. But how do we continue adding the slaves? I have explained and showed you that option in the Jenkins console. Can we also add slaves dynamically? Yes, even that option is available. For that, you would need to have an auto-scaling group feature in any of the given cloud services. Okay, then how do we answer this question in the interview? Yes, I have used Jenkins multi-node setup because it offers me a high availability for our production pipelines. And to add Jenkins slave machine to the master, I would log into Jenkins, go to the settings, and I should find an option called as Manage Nodes and Clouds. And once I click on that option, I will be able to give the node information and the slave will be registered to the master. If you don't know where this option is, or if you forget about this option, where it exists, there is no need to panic. You can say that, yes, I have used it. We have been using it in production. And I believe there is an option in the Jenkins. I don't remember it exactly where, but using that option, we will be able to add the slave nodes to the master, and all the slave nodes will register to the master. This is how you can also answer this question in a different way. I hope it is clear. Currently, we have a Jenkins job, but we don't have any kind of notifications on job success or failure. We use Slack for our internal communication. How would you enable notification service in this case? It's a very simple question, in my opinion. And the focus on the question is, how would you enable an automation in place that would bring out observability into the users? You know Jenkins, very good. But the actual use case of Jenkins will come into picture when there is a failure of job and when you notify a particular people to fix it. If not, they will have to stare at the Jenkins web UI and see when the job fails, which we don't want, right? So how can we handle this scenario then? Let us think about it a bit. And I would like you to pause the video here and see how you would answer this if this question were to be asked in the interview. I will go ahead and explain this. This is a very simple question in my opinion, and it doesn't require any critical explanation, but I will share more information for you guys. Jenkins has what we call as plugins. And these plugins are super helpful for us. And we do have a Slack plugin. Now, the first step is to install the Slack plugin, okay? The first step is to install the plugin, Slack plugin. After that, once you install the Slack plugin, you can go to your job and you can mention this example I have shared, okay? What is the example? I have shared with you a pipeline command where you can say Slack send, okay? Slack send. What it is sending? It is sending a failure message on failure. On failure, you know that there is a feature called as on failure in Jenkins. On failure, you will call Slack send option, and this will send out a notification. It's going to send out a notification to the Slack channel. Now, which Slack channel to send and what to send? You can send a message here, and you can also configure which Slack channel to send. And which integration, when it happens, what the only thing we need to integrate is we need to make sure we need to get a webhook. Okay. So webhook is how Jenkins can integrate with the Slack. Jenkins can communicate with Slack. And to get the webhook, you need to be an admin. And if you are not an admin in your company, you can reach out to your IT team and they will give you a webhook using which you can integrate Jenkins, and then you can do the needful. If you were already aware of this particular scenario, awesome. You know how to tackle this question in the interview. If there is someone who is watching this video when you're taking my course is not aware of it, I am pretty much sure you have understood now how to make such kind of integration. Okay, so how do we answer this particular question in the interview, my friends? Very easy. You can start by saying that because we are using Slack as a main communication tool, the first and foremost step I would do is to find out that if I can install a plugin in my Jenkins. I can do this by going to the Jenkins console, going to the plugins section. I can find out the Slack plugin and I would install it. If required, I would also restart my Jenkins services based on the notification I get after I have installed the plugin. The next step would be to configure my pipeline accordingly so that on failure, I would probably send out a Slack notification to that particular channel. By doing so, the people who are running this particular Jenkins job will be notified on failure. Definitely, I can also do this on success if required. I can also do it on success if it is required, but I will leave this particular scenario to my developers because there might be an overflooding of the Slack message at certain case. Hence, it could be optional. This is how I can integrate my services, that is, the pipeline can be integrated for certain kind of notification methodology. Just in case, if you are wondering if we can do other kind of notification, I would also suggest that we can also do email notification if it is required. We can also do email notification if it is required. And we can also do Slack notification, which we discussed already. And other plugins are also available, which can do other kind of notifications also. This is how you can tackle this particular question in the interview. I hope you have understood this.
What is a multi-branch pipeline? It's a very basic question, I know, but many people make mistakes when explaining this simple concept. Hence, I am asking this question. So what is a multi-branch pipeline? Let us try to understand a bit of details around this and then see how to tackle this question in the interview. By definition, multi-branch pipeline enables projects you have implemented in different Jenkins file for different branches, right? So what do I mean by different branches? I will take an example. We have a master branch in Jenkins. We have a master branch of our GitHub repo. And in this master branch, we will have a Jenkins file. So here, maybe we are telling the Jenkins to deploy to a production server. But what if I want to deploy this particular code? What does this master branch contain? It contains a code, right? So what if I want to deploy this master branch to testing or staging development? It's not possible. But we will not be testing everything in master, no? So what will happen? We will have a staging branch also. But if we have a staging branch, it should not be deployed to production. So what do we do here now? With the staging branch present, we will now get this staging branch from our GitHub repo. And then we will have a Jenkins file. But in this Jenkins file, the details will be different. We will be deploying this to staging env. Okay. So what if we have another branch called as testing branch, right? That is before staging also we can have testing or dev branch. where again it is a GitHub repo branch. So it's a branch in GitHub repo. Then again it has a Jenkins file which is completely different, and then it goes to a test or dev environment. This way it is easy for you to test your code in different environment before you finally publish this code to the master branch. This production methodology helps you to test your code, but the key thing is the Jenkins file are different, right? Now, if you want to set up this kind of environment in Jenkins, you cannot have just one Jenkins pipeline. You cannot have it. If you just have one Jenkins pipeline, this setup will not work. So what is an alternative? Here you can use a feature in Jenkins that is called multi-branch pipeline. In this, you are going to say master branch, you are going to pick this Jenkins file that is there in this repo. Then it will also check the other branches, that is staging. It is going to pick the Jenkins file in the staging branch. Remember, all of this can only be done if you have proper Git branching system available. Okay, this is very important. If you have a proper GitHub branching system available, then all of this can be implemented very easily. So this is what is called as multi-branch pipeline. Okay, so how do you present this particular answer in the interview? This is how you can present it. Multi-branch pipelines in Jenkins allows us to make sure that if we have different branches in our GitHub repository, we can use all of those different branches and deploy it in different environment by implementing different Jenkins file altogether. This multi-branch setup is very important if we want to test our code, let us say in testing environment, and then push it to staging environment and then to master environment. To achieve this without multi-branch pipeline methodology, we might have to create 3 separate Jenkins jobs, which is tedious and also not something we would recommend. Rather, we can use the feature of Jenkins that itself is multi-branch pipeline, by using which we will be able to achieve the same result. This is how you can present the answer in the interview also. I hope you understood a few concepts in this video, and also very importantly, how to answer them in the interview.
The next question is coming from the domain CICD, and the question is, what is a blue-green deployment? It's a very simple question. I am pretty much sure everyone watching this video now, you guys are aware of it, but let me try and explain this solution. So the question is blue-green deployment. What exactly is blue-green deployment? It's a deployment methodology that is used in companies heavily. And let me explain what it is. So to do so, I will use the same colors. First, I will have a setup called as blue setup. Now this setup is made up of all the infrastructures and they are a blue setup. Then I will create a green setup, which is basically called as green setup. And I will create like this. And then we have some users. We have some users. End users. When we want to do some deployment, let us take an example of a website. Okay, we will take an example of a website. And we want to do some deployment on this website. How can we do the deployment? The website deployment version will be 1.0.8, let us say. This is the current version. This current version will be running on the green deployment over here. And we will have a switch here, network switch, that is controlling the incoming traffic flow. So all the traffic is now pointing to the green deployment. Now, a new deployment that we want to do is 1.0.9. It's a new deployment. Now, where will I do it? I will not do it on green. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to deploy this new version into my blue setup. So blue setup currently has 0.9. This is the new deployment. After this deployment is done, the traffic from the green will be routed to blue. So how does it happen? This is how it will get routed. So this routing can be done using, Route 53, or there are other famous tools called as F5, etc. This is how you can control the routing. And now all the traffic from the end user is going to blue setup. Blue is having the version of 1.0.9. Now, will we update the green also? No, green will still be in 0.8. I'll tell you why. Now, after the deployment, 100% traffic is flowing to blue setup. Now the question is, we monitor the situation. What is happening? As an example, let us say after 3 hours of deployment, we found a bug in our version 1.0.9. What do we want to do? We want to immediately switch back. Now, it is not difficult to switch back for us in this case, because it is very easy in this case, because we already have a green version that was just running our previous version. So all the traffic now will be reverted to the green deployment, the green setup, which is running a previous version. This is what is called as blue-green deployment, and it is a most mature way of doing deployments in very big organizations, which also serves a lot of traffic. There are some downsides for this, like extra cost of infrastructure, etc. But that is something that we should also consider based on the use case of our application. Okay, so I think I have given you a brief information about it. Now, how do you present this in the interview? Let us see. This is how you can present this answer in the interview. Blue-green deployment is considered a mature way of deployment when it comes to very large application that serves traffic to thousands of users. It is critical for us to make sure that any new deployment happening doesn't cause downtime for us. Hence, in the blue-green deployment, we have two setups, a blue setup and a green setup. And one setup will always be running a previous version of it. To give this explanation, let me take an example. Let us say we have 1.0.8 version, that is the current version. It is running on green deployment. Now, if I want to make a new deployment, that is 1.0.9, then I would deploy it on the blue setup and route all the traffic towards the blue setup and monitor the situation in the blue. If everything goes well, then well and good. But if something fails, what will happen is we have to revert. Now, we don't have to panic and worry, because the green setup that we have is already running the previous version. All we have to do is change our network configurations to send the traffic to the green setup. This is called as blue-green deployment, and it is very efficient where we are speaking of very large application. That being said, on a side note, I would add that it also incurs a lot of cost for us sometimes because of maintaining two different infrastructure setup. But if the application is large enough, handling a lot of traffic, then it is fair enough to use such kind of deployment methodology. And this is what is called as blue-green deployment. This is how you can answer this particular question in the interview. Well, that's it for this video, my friends. I hope you understood some concepts and very importantly, understood how to answer this in the interview.